To our next speaker, who is Valter Bonan. He was the president of the Dolomites National Park in Belluno, northern Italy. He has been very active in the movement on water. He's very active. He was responsible for the Veneto region during the campaign. It was a referendum campaign on public water. And from 2012, he has been a councillor who's been responsible for participatory democracy and common goods, water, agriculture, energy, the environment, and tourism in Feltre. Throughout Italy, he asked me to stress it beforehand, there are only two municipalities, one in the north, Feltre near Venice, and one in the south, Naples, where there is a position for a councillor who is responsible specifically for common goods. Now, I think that's very, very interesting. We should use that for future reference. Mr. Dimaras is our own councillor, who's, it might be a good idea if you can have someone responsible for common goods as a councillor. That's for your next for your next time round, Yorgo. So I'm going to give the floor to Valter to begin with. I'd just like to introduce the title of his presentation, and it's the democracy of common goods for post-development transition. And Walter now has the floor. Oh, thank you very much indeed. I think that the previous speakers have really established the theory and the strategy of various really important aspects. I am going to look at certain initiatives, actions, which have been undertaken at local and regional level within this area. I'd like to thank you very much indeed for having given me the opportunity to meet you here. I was looking forward to this meeting with you with some emotion, some empathy as well, I would say. And there are two specific aspects in parallel, I would say, which led to this. And that was the my desire to actually undertake with you an appropriate reading, if you like, and put it that way, of the reality which surrounds us. Also, this very deep and painful crisis we as you, or you as we, are moving through, and try and identify together possible responses towards change which actually lie within the crisis itself. But at the same time, I was looking at the Acropolis this morning. There's some beautiful poppies out there now as well. The season's a bit more advanced than it is back in my mountains. But looking at all of this, I was thinking about these really basic questions, core questions we are raising this evening, and whether or not they give rise to any possible responses as well from our cultural and traditional heritage, the eco-centric paradigms of numerous pre-modern societies. And very often we do this, looking towards the Oriental cultures, or the cultures which stem from indigenous traditions in pre-Columbian America. But we tend to neglect the things which lie closer to us in the cradle of Western civilization, our Greece, in other words. The Platonic definition of the cosmos as a whole, sky, the earth, men, all linked together through union, friendship, and harmony. This concept of arete, granted to all beings, even non-living beings, I think are very important pioneering approaches to this holistic vision of the world, profound respect for all biodiversity. And I think that they speak of us, they speak of the present, of today, temperance, strength, and particularly contemplative wisdom. These are virtues which are related to the sense of limit, education in sobriety. I was very recently reading about people living beyond the limits, the reasonable limits, and people lose the point, which means that maybe we have to come back to some of our cognitive potential, which comes from our own contemplative experience, which is freed from the weight and time of the goods which flood us, redundant goods. So according to this ancient, yet at the same time contemporary biocentrism, it's mankind that practices these types of virtuous behavior. Too often in politics, we evoke visions and strategies, but we don't actually then implement the appropriate actions in real terms. And that is a step which I think together we have to start to take, apart from just looking at the situation around us. So maybe we're all called upon to patiently reweave this ancient but also at the same time very modern fabric towards and in the interest of new social justice and another environmental justice in the face of this genocide of life, culture, and biodiversity in the model of development and consumption. To be a bit provocative, I think maybe we have to start re-asking ourselves some very simple questions, which I think are really basic ones. What form of production of goods and services, in other words, to the benefit of whom, using what instruments, and with what forms of organization? And thus, finally, as Professor Bonaiuto was saying, we've got this question of what resilience of politics and democracy in this context. So on the basis of these questions, and I do apologize for synthesizing this largely, but I think that we really have to focus on a concept which is that of common goods, which is very much involved with degrowth, through certain processes related to this process as well, which are parts of our collective understanding and my own experience, my personal experience that I've lived both at administrative and institutional level, but also in these movements and these struggles and all of the committees and groups and associations that are involved in this context. So what I'm suggesting we talk about is the transition to post-development and the fact that this can but begin from the recognition, the recontextualization, and the legal regulation of common goods as being goods which are indispensable to the market. Broadly owned. I mean, I'm not going to mention groups as such, but water, earth, landscape, parks, rivers. These goods need to be managed with new, different forms of governance, which have to be inclusive. They have to be based on direct democracy. Degrowth and common goods, I believe, are two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, you've got this desire to have cohesion based on living well, autonomy and self-governance, sustainability of common goods as well. But then you've also got the critical dimension of degrowth, deconstruction of the imagined and the unsustainable model of the money economy, as we've just been hearing. So we therefore also need urgently to shape a transnational legal notion of common goods. Just let me refer to what's happened, for example, in Ecuador, Bolivia, within highly advanced countries from this point of view, who have changed their own constitutions on this. I'd also like to refer to some important initiatives happening right now as the European Citizens Initiative, which is shouting for recognition of water as a common good, not as an economic resource at European level. This statutory regulatory side is also important as well, to consolidate processes which are important in terms of democracy. Now, I think that someone said that God is the son of our common rules as well, so that's very important. It has to be borne in mind as this step that we have to take and demand and have it imposed from the grassroots level, bottom up, in other words. And we have to go beyond this ambiguity, dichotomy of the public and private. And these are two areas which contaminate each other. They often overlap, where gradually, though, the public is ceding to the private, and the private is being introduced into the public side. So I think in some way we really need also to have a different phenomenological approach, and it's a complicated process, the process of recognizing common goods. And the way I see it, it draws its own origins, its own lifeblood, in actual fact, from these struggles and this mobilization to support these goods, this awareness of and defending the non-tangible nature of the market on these fundamental rights of people, and the recognition of common goods. I'd like to give you a very specific example here, just to not to talk about myself, but because it has been incredibly important in my country, in Italy, in other words. This was the referendum against water privatization. In 2011, this referendum avoided the not the possibility of privatizing water, but rather an obligation to privatize water. This referendum blocked, vetoed the choices of a government who had said that it was going to be obligatory to privatize this common good, which is crucial to the life of each and every one of us. 27 million Italian citizens, with their vote, adopted a position which really was explosive in terms of the prevalent market situation. And this didn't only happen at European level. This was possible, and here I'd like to pick up on certain aspects which I think symbolically and in specific terms are significant also in terms of the success of this initiative. First and foremost, what happened was that there was a platform, a very clear value platform, radical objectives in terms of their content. they really were very clear. It was the radical nature of the content of this which made for the success of the initiative. And, you know, it was saying, take water off the market. You can't make a profit from common goods. I mean, this is a very alternative, very different line of thinking over and above the usual one, but it was a very clear stance which is taken here, and that's what gave us such a significant response. And then a dual approach, which is often forgotten. This was a national movement on water, but it was very well rooted at territorial level. So you had this two-way line, the national movement and the territorial presence, and that is crucial. You can't get rid of that just to simplify things, because otherwise you're always going to have this hierarchical type of management. Then also it was cross-cutting. It involved people from all different walks of life. This movement brought together the councils, the social centers, you know, very different cultural dimensions, if you like. And then also looking at the leadership of it in the water movement. Leadership didn't come from the people, the subjects only talking about themselves, but it was rather the issue itself, the theme. There was no personal leadership, but it was the actual theme itself, the subject itself, which was providing the leadership. Now, this victory, this success is and was subject to attempts of regression from recent and also current governments here. They were trying to undermine the result, to undermine the outcome, and to bring back in through the window what the referendum kicked out through the door. The government is showing that it is not capable of self-reform. But this initiative achieved a major outcome, and it really brought an awful lot to the fore at territorial level, which actually express a new awareness. They express the vitality of communities who embrace a local project towards ecologically converting the economy. And I'm making this point basically for two reasons. Firstly, now more than ever, I think we have to bring the truth in from the outlying areas, from the fringes, from the grassroots level, from what's happening in the rural areas on the periphery, because the center is blind, it's deaf, and it only looks at itself, and it's linked to the markets. And that is why I was also, I believe, invited to share with you some of our small experiences, maybe quite significant, I don't know, but I'll try this because I think that they show collective experience which people have actually lived. For example, this question of direct participatory democracy, which we've looked at as well. I mean, these are the necessary foundations to build this house of common goods. If we don't have solid foundations on citizenship and direct democracy, then this house of common goods will not be able to stand. So we thought that maybe we could formally establish these citizenship laboratories with their own rules and regulations, where each and every citizen who lives in our area can sign up and make their own direct contribution to the to management and proposals, and debating also choices made by the local governments as well. Now, these bodies either accept the proposals that come from the laboratories, they are required actually to come back to the laboratories and explain why these initiatives, which came from the grassroots level, have not been taken on board. So we are seeing this delegation from the top down towards the bottom. And only on this basis can all citizens make their own contribution to put in their own experience, their own ideas. It allows the community to have these links between young and old, where there can be this different exchange of experience and ideas. And this can be done in places that people know. So we're shifting from a type of democracy, a one-off democracy type thing, to the right to democracy, which is a very different thing, a very different concept, because it happens on an ongoing basis that people know, and it can overturn, it can change completely the political agenda of whoever is in governance at that time. And our work with these laboratories allowed us to start moving down certain paths that we thought were very important. First and foremost, putting a stop to land grabbing. Not only the rare earths we're hearing people talking about more and more now, but in all rural areas where there are specific characteristics related to the nature, what we're seeing happening is that people are grabbing this land, and as such, these areas are becoming ever rarer. There are sectors in agro-food industry. They are really looking at our lands, which are still so natural, because where they've established their intensive models of agricultural production, they can't reconvert. They're in this paradoxical cycle, if you like, in terms of their cultural, their cropping forms. We stood out against the desertification of our areas as well. If I can just go off with a tangent here, there are some contradictory points involved in the green economy. Our mountains, for example, there are hundreds of requests for people to use our rivers for hydroelectrical production, not because that production is needed for some absolutely crucial reason in terms of quantity and the energy produced, but because we've got green certificates, we've got white certificates, paradoxically a whole series of incentives which are being used in order to intervene and are actually harming, destroying the environment. And that is a further contradiction which is of crucial importance. We're also standing up against the construction of major infrastructure. Professor Bonaiuti was talking about this contradiction about the cradle of growth and its need for infrastructure. On the one hand, we're seeing whole areas of the mountains, Val di Susa, for example. I don't know whether you've heard what's been happening there, the Val di Susa, where the people are coming out against a high-speed stretch, the Lisbon-Kiev track, that theoretically no one would actually want to travel, but there are speculation, the speculation not only about the actual construction itself, but the project behind it as well. So, as I say, we've got these major infrastructures being discussed, and at the same time we are dismantling the whole inter-regional rail network that the citizens actually use, and they are being totally dismantled. So what we are trying to do in our area is invert this trend as well. The Dolomites in Belluno, we are World Heritage, we're a UNESCO area, and they want these motorways to cross through simply to speed up the irrational traffic flows when, I mean, we don't want people to transit through us. We want to welcome people. We want to extend our hospitality to them. That we live at a slow pace in our area. And that's why we are trying to think in homogenic terms for our areas. Eco-bio-districts, for example, where we have environmental priorities brought into the political choices, which have to look at these various different sectors, these segments, and get them talking one with another. Not only water, not only mobility, not only tourism, production as well, agricultural production. This is something which we are also addressing. For example, the preservation of cropped biodiversity, traditional seeds. I mean, the EU wants to regulate the trade in traditional seeds, which basically are an element of guaranteeing the continuation of these crops, which are resistant because they've got the features, the characteristics of their own area. And they're trying to force on us these hybrid seeds from the multinationals. And they want to destroy this heritage. It's not only a question of identity. It's about knowledge, taste, the health, the well-being of the food that we produce. So we organized and we try to have short-circuit, shared consumerism. Hundreds of families, in other words, have got together and established a direct link with the producer, with the farmer, with the craftsperson, and they buy directly, bypassing the major retail outlets. It's something which can work, and it provides greater guarantees for the person who buys a product because they are immediately aware of the dimension, the short circuit with distribution of the goods. And at the same time, there is also a trade link and an awareness and understanding. I think we can open up a common front on a transnational level as well, because I think that Greece, in terms of its production, well, obviously major landowners exist everywhere, but in terms of the dimensions here, we're talking about small farms, small holdings in Greece first and foremost. So even the new common agricultural policy, I mean, is it raising consistent questions? It's not actually looking at two major questions. In other words, the need for rotation in crops. You can't have intensive crops which impoverish, deplete the soil in terms of agribusiness, which can no longer stand in terms of its productive continuity. And also, there's the fact that we have to look at those forms of agriculture, small ones, which can protect and defend biodiversity in the landscape as well. I mean, that's a very core point. So the incentive should be inversely proportional to the scale of the land, and therefore should focus more on that type of crop which can act in defense of the local region. But also these joint purchases, joint provisions, we're doing it for energy, as you can do for agri-food products. These collegiate groupings for photovoltaics, for example, are looking at reducing energy consumption and working on buildings, making them more energy friendly as well. And the idea is that people, if they work collectively, can be more effective rather than having each individual citizen having to approach this on their own. If we work together, we, I think, can work much better. I think I've almost run out of time. So these were some of the examples. There is one, I forgot to mention this one, but it has been quite successful. We conducted a census of the farmers around, and we made the public land available for people to set up small holdings, allotments. I think it's a very simple project. It doesn't require any major organization. It actually establishes a social relationship. There's people going and producing themselves. It's self-production, and it also makes for a very healthy life, actually, because, well, apart from the products which stem from it, there's activity involved as well. I mean, these are just small-scale examples. There are no easy solutions. I see we've got a pharmacy there that could come up with some quick answers for us, but I don't know. That's not what we're going for. These are ideas which we could think about. We want to bring in similar ideas as well, learn from others. We think it's important to establish links between these short and long circuits. It's our idea, for example, is to have these European bioregions, the Mediterranean, the Alps, where the territorial specific features really are seen as specific features which require a specific response. So we need reciprocity, we need sharing, and that really will help us move towards degrowth. But they're crucial for that transition to degrowth.